Assalamu alaikum. I am MD Tanvir Siddiqui, student of Prime University, Department of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology. Today I am presenting a novel. My today novel name is A Passage to India. A Passage to India is a 1924 novel by English author E.M. Forster, set again the backdrop of the British Raj and the Indian independence movement in the 1920s. It was selected as one of the 100 great works of 20th century English literature by the Modern Library and won the 1924 James Tate Black Memorial Prize for Fiction. Time magazine included the novel in its all time 100 novels list. The novel is based on Forster's experience in India, deriving the title from Walt Whitman's 1817 poem Passage to India in Leaves of Grace. The story revolves around four characters: Dr. Aziz, his British friend Mr. Cyril Fielding, Mrs. Maury, and Miss Adela Quested. During a trip to the fiction Maradar Caves, the Barber Caves of Bihar, Adela thinks she finds herself along with Dr. Aziz in one of the caves and subsequently panics and flees. It is assumed that Dr. Aziz has attempted to assault her Aziz trail and its run up and aftermath bring to a boil the common racial tensions and prejudice between Indians and the British during the colonial era. A young British schoolmistress, Adela Quested, and her elderly friend, Mrs. Murray, visited the fictional city of Chandrapuri, British India. Adela is to decide if she wants to marry Mrs. Murray's son, Ronnie Hassel, the city magistrate. Meanwhile, Dr. Aziz, a young Indian Muslim physician, is dining with two of his Indian friends and conversing about whether it is possible to be a friend of an Englishman. During the meal, a summons arrives from Major Chalander, Aziz unpleasant superior at the hospital. Aziz hastens to Chalander's Buggles as ordered, but he is delayed by a flat tire and difficulty in finding a tonga, and the major has already left in a huff. Disconsolate, Aziz walks down the road toward the railway station. When he sees his favorite monks, he enters on impulse. He sees a strange Englishman there and wails at her not to profane this sacred place. The woman, Mrs. Murray, has respect for native customs. This deserves Aziz and the two chat and part as friends. Mrs. Murray returns to the British Gentleman's Club down the road and relays her experience at the mosque. Ronnie herself, her son, initially thinks she is talking about an Englishman and becomes indignant when he learns the facts. Adela, however, is into it because the newcomers had expressed a desire to see Indians. Mr. Tarton, the city tax collector, invites numerous Indian gentlemen to a party at his house. The party turns out to be an awkward event due to the Indians' timidity and the Britons' bigotry. But Adela meets Cyril Fielding, principal of Chandrapuri's government run college for Indians. Fielding invites Adela and Mrs. Murray to a tea party, and with him and a Hindu Brahmin professor named Narayan Godbali. At Adela's request, he extends his invitation to Dr. Aziz. At Fielding's tea party, everyone has a good time conversing about India and Fielding, and Aziz become friends. Aziz promises to take Mrs. Mori and Adela to see the Marabar Caves, a distant cave complex. Ronnie Hassels arrives and finding Adela unaccompanied with Dr. Aziz and Professor Goodbally, rudely breaks up the party. Aziz mistakenly believes that the women are offended that he has not followed uh, through on his promise and arranges an outing to the caves at great expense to himself. Fielding and Godboli are supposed to accompany the expedition, but they miss the train. Aziz and the women explore the caves. In the first cave, Mrs. Moody is overcome with claustrophobia. But that the claustrophobia is the echo distributed by the sound. Mrs. Mori declines to continue exploring. Adela and Aziz, accompanied by guide, climb to the upper caves. As Aziz helps Adela up to hill, she asks whether he has more than one wife. Disconcerted by bluntness of the remark, he ducks into a cave to compose himself. When he comes out, he finds the guide alone outside the caves. The guide says Adela has gone into a cave by herself. Aziz looks for her in vain. Deciding she is lost, he strikes the guide, who runs away. Aziz looks around and discovers Adela's field glasses lying broken on the ground. He puts them in his pocket. Aziz then looks down the hill and sees Adela is speaking to another young English woman, Miss Derrick, who has arrived there Fielding in a car. Aziz runs down the hill and greets Fielding, but Miss Derrick and Adela drives off without explanation. Fielding, Mrs. Mori, and Aziz return to Chandrapuri on the train. Adela has injured herself while descending from the caves. All the train station, Aziz is arrested and charged with sexually assaulting Adela in a cave. The run up to his trial releases the racial tensions between the British and the Indians. Adela says that Aziz followed her into the cave and tried to grab her, and that she fended him off by swinging her field glasses at him. The only evidence the British have is the field glasses in the possession of Aziz. Despite this, the British believe that Aziz is guilty. They are stunned when Fielding uh, proclaims his belief in Aziz's innocence. Fielding is ostracized and condemned as a blood traitor, but the Indians who consider the assault's allegations a fraud welcome him. During the weeks before the trial, Mrs. Murray is apathetic and irritable. Although she professes her belief in Ajiz's innocence, she does nothing to help him. Ronnie, alarmed by his mother, assertion assertion that Aziz is innocent, arranges for her return by ship to England before she can testify at the trial. Mrs. Murray becomes more concerned with her own end of life issues as she feels her health failing. Her relationship with her son allows her to be distracted and less sympathetic to Aziz's situation. Adela becomes confused as to Aziz's guilt. At the trail, she is asked whether Aziz sexually assaulted her. She has a vision of the cave and it turns to that Adela had while in the cave received a shock similar to Mrs. Morris. Ronnie Hassofs breaks up the engagement to Adela and she stays at Fielding's house until her passage on a boat to England is arranged. After explaining to Fielding that Eco was the cause of the whole business, she departs India never to return. 2 years later, Fielding returns to India. His wife is Stella, Mrs. Murray's daughter from a second marriage. As is now the Raja's chief physician, comes to respect and love Fielding again. However, he does not give up his dream of a free and united India. It is the novel's last sentences. He explains that he and Fielding cannot be friends until India becomes independent. The message of a passage to India is that the British imperialistic approach is not a recipe for long term success. Foster sees white man's pardon ideology as a part of the British approach to India. This imperialist ideology stretches how the British have an obligation to be in India. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for everything. Thanks a lot.